So if you've been to the channel before, then you know that I have done some work on this 2013 Acura RDX. And to be more specific, I did a frame pull on it on my homemade frame rack. So after I made that pull, I kind of put this project on a side burner and worked on other things in the meantime. However, every time I come out and take a look at this thing, it just pisses me off because it's still not finished. And I figured that there's not a whole lot that needs to be done to finish this project, so let's get started. So now, if we look at the undamaged side, we see this part right here, and it's called an outrigger. So one part of it is connected to the side of the frame rail, and the upper part is connected to this side horn. So now, if we look at our damaged side, we don't have an outrigger here because I already drilled it out. This thing was just a mangled mess. And then this is our side horn. This thing was pushed all the way under. It was kind of sitting, it was bent under this way. I got it pulled out and it still looks like garbage right now. However, there's really no need to get it replaced because I can fix it. Because in order to get this thing replaced correctly, quote unquote, I would have to get this inner part drilled out, and to get to the spot welds, I would have to get under this core support because the spot welds are right here, and then there's another one down here. And just to get to them, I would have to remove this upper part of the core support that ties under all of these pieces right here, and that means I would have to drill out half of this front end just to get to this piece right here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'll cut out this outer skin and I'll gain access to the inside of this horn, and I'll be able to work it all out with hammer and dolly. And this is what we see. So it looks pretty mangled, and there's a good sized tear in here. I can almost fit my finger through it. So let's go ahead and get it hammered out. So after beating on this thing for 10 or 15 minutes, this is kind of what I got. So this gap really closed up a lot, and I'll be able to get this all welded in. And let's see, yeah, it kind of looks uneven right here, but that's because metal got stretched out a little, and that's okay, because once this panel will go into place, I'll be able to kind of clamp everything down and get everything welded. And then that heat will do enough shrinking to where all of this will look right. And also, while I was at it, I fitted in the new outrigger just to make sure that everything fits. The reason I did that, I wanted to make sure that my spacing between the frame rail and the horn was correct, which it is. So at this point, I'm pretty much ready to get everything welded in. One last step is I gotta get all of this prepped, and also I'll be spraying this area down with some weld-through primer. So this is what we got. It's all welded in, and the inside of it looks pretty straight. Yeah, it turned out real good. I'm happy. So everything looks good. However, to make it look a little prettier, I'm gonna go ahead and apply a thin coat of body filler. I will sand that down, then I'll get it primered and painted. Guys, it is the next day. The primer is nice and dry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not gonna go and start sanding the primer, because we're not trying to end up with a really nice finish like we would, you know, on the outside of the body, like the fenders, the top of the hood, and the doors and all that. No. If you look at the finish under the hood, everything is kind of matte. So the only thing you can really see is just the shadows, not really even the reflection. So if they use any clear coat, it's maybe a little bit different. They just use really cheap clear coat, so this way they're not wasting any more money on manufacturing under the hood where it's not really necessary. So that's why I didn't really go out of my way to make all of this look pristine. I made it look to where it's presentable, it's good enough, and plus all of this is gonna get covered up with an air box and a battery once everything is assembled, so none of this will even be visible. So all I'm gonna do is I'll just use a Scotch-Brite pad to kind of roughen up the surface of the primer, so that way the new paint will have something to bite into. So since I will try and match the dollar look of the factory finish, I'm just gonna use a cheapy clear coat in a can. I've sprayed this stuff before and it does come out kind of dull once it dries, so I think something like this would be a lot more appropriate than using a nice glossy clear. And for my spray out card, I actually want to use, I'm going to go ahead and use a clear in a can, but this clear is much glossier than the other stuff. This is actually much better stuff. So, because I do want this spray out card to be glossy, because this way it'll match better against the factory finish. I always try to do a spray out card. This way I can kind of check and see how close the new paint is in comparison to my original paint on the vehicle. This mix looks to be pretty close. I mean, it's really hard to get a color that's dead on, and it looks like this color may be just a tad bit lighter, but it is definitely very blendable. And so once I get this blended out, you will not see a difference at all. So this is what it looks like all finished up, and this cheap clear really did give it that nice dull look, and it matches perfectly to the rest of this factory dullness. So next thing I want to do is I'm going to fix this hood because this corner got pushed under. This is what the other side looks like, nice and straight, and this is all whack. Now I would normally change out this hood, however this hood is made out of aluminum. It is not available aftermarket, so it would have to be used or new, and used these hoods run about 500 bucks. That's a little too rich for my blood, so I'm gonna go ahead and fix it. Now I'll tell you one thing, aluminum is much harder to work with than with steel, so it's gonna be a little tricky, and you gotta really heat this panel up in order to start bending stuff back, but that's what's gonna have to be done. So after I pulled this rubber seal back, I can see that the upper skin is partially separated from this inner structure of the hood in a couple of places. So it runs all the way down and right in here. So you can see what's going on a little better from this angle. So we got just not a whole lot of separation. We do have this big gap, however, I'm just gonna follow the paint line, and that's as far as I'm gonna bring this inner skin under the upper skin. And I will put few tack welds somewhere along the seam, so this way, as I'll start banging on this edge, both of the layers of the hood will move out together. This is actually the first time I've ever used a spool gun or welded aluminum for that matter, so these welds aren't pretty. Main thing is I just don't want to burn through this really thin aluminum sheet metal. So my goal is not to make these welds pretty, but just to make sure that they hold, because later on I will smooth them out and then it'll get painted and covered with the rubber strips, so none of these will be visible. So hood's back on, and I also went ahead and mounted a replacement fender. Now I also went ahead and installed both of the headlights, and especially this one because I was going to shape the contour of the hood based off of the contour of the headlights. So let me show you where we're at. I banged away in this hood for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, played with it, and then I got it really good. So it lines up with that headlight just about perfect. Next step would be to throw on our bumper cover and check the fitment between the bumper cover and all of the other components. Bumpers on, let's check all the gaps. So first, hood to fender, looks good. Fender to bumper, looks good. Headlight to bumper, looks good, lines up great. This gap right here is perfect. Then hood to grill gap is even all the way around, looks good. So right here, our gap is good. This fender to hood, great. On the side, perfect. This side looks great. This gap is perfect. And right here, one more time, this gap is perfect, and it's even with the headlight all the way down, and it matches up to the grill just fine. I call that good. So the next step here would be to just fine tune this area just a little more, take out a couple of dents in that replacement fender that I got, and then get everything prepped and painted. So it's gonna take me a little while to get to the next step here because yours truly is getting married and I have to get ready for my wedding. So I'm gonna have to put a car stuff on hold for just a little while, but that video will be out here pretty soon, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Go ahead and hit that like button. And if you have any questions for me or suggestions, go ahead and leave me a comment down below.